So you've got a job, you've got a family, you've got some money, you've been saving up, and you've also been learning about real estate investing. You're on BiggerPockets, you're reading all the books that you should be reading, and you just haven't taken that next step. You've got no time. There's lots of excuses out there, and some of them that I used to fall into myself. The biggest one being time. And when you have a baby at home or children, small kids, you've got a full-time job that's taking up most of your time, and you want to spend time with your significant other, with your kids. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how you're going to fit in something else such as real estate investing. I want to be able to tell you how I'm getting into that and how I'm doing it myself. I'm a father of a 1-year-old. I've got a full-time job myself, and I'm heavily invested in pursuing a flip that I'm in the middle of right now. And I want to dive into how I was able to get to the point where I'm able to do this now, and hopefully some of these things help you guys out. So first, you gotta take a hard look at how you spend your time. Whether you have a calendar or a notepad or anything, if you feel like you have no time, the first and foremost thing I would say is track what you are spending your time on. For me, my biggest excuse was time, and I used to waste a ton of time on Netflix, the Xbox, just things that weren't adding anything to my life. Sure, it was downtime, and everybody needs downtime, but I get the great downtime benefits of spending time with my family, playing with my kid, and enjoying time with my wife now, as opposed to before, kind of mindless wages, playing on these games or watching shows on Netflix for hours on end. So taking a hard look at my own schedule was something that took a lot of time for me to realize, even though it was right there in front of my face. It had a lot to do with really establishing my why, and my biggest, most important reason why I do what I do, and that is for my family. And once you're really able to see that clear goal in the end, it kind of, the fog shifts away, and now it all kind of becomes clear how all of this can work out. So the biggest thing I would say is take a real hard look at your schedule, take a real hard look at what you're spending your time on, and figure out what isn't necessary. If something isn't important, and real estate investing is important, you'll figure out how to make it work. You'll figure out how to switch one in for the other. The second thing I would say is your education. And what I mean by that is all that time you are spending on BiggerPockets, on reading these books, it's not for nothing, I promise you. Maybe you haven't been spending 4 years like I have, and I felt this despair, this dread, where I just was going to be stuck in this analysis paralysis, is what we call it, forever. I was 26 years old at the time, and I was learning everything I could about real estate investing and all the promise and the lure that is almost kind of hinted at that everybody can have early retirement or through real estate investing. And it can happen very quickly if you jump in and you figure out how to make it work for yourself. And I had let 4 years go by where I was just learning and learning and learning and learning, and I never took the dive. I've got a couple stories that I'll share on future videos where I did try to get into an Airbnb, lost my escrow on that one, but that's another story. That is the best money I've ever lost because it happened just before COVID. Again, separate video. But this time I dove in with a partner that I was able to get with on flipping a home. But going back to the main point, all of this wouldn't have been possible if I didn't read, if I didn't spend that time learning. Now, you don't have to go and spend 4 years just digesting everything you can, but you do need a base. You do need a base of knowledge. And if you haven't started that, the biggest resource that I found is BiggerPockets. I know I keep mentioning them. They do have a ton of people on those forums that connect and network all the time and share knowledge, and you can basically find anything on there. It's really like Google for real estate investing. A lot of those videos are great. I would take the videos with a grain of salt because a lot of the numbers they use are idealistic. Now that I am actually in investments and throwing my money out there and putting my money where my mouth is, I do see what the real numbers are. And so I would say my word of caution is just understand that some of the numbers that they do share typically have to do with the areas that people are in. So it's all really per your locale. But that aside, another great resource I would say is This book was one of the first books I really got into, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. I've gone into dozens of books. It all started with that one. That one really set up my base foundation of knowledge, and then I was able to read books on other niches and really learn about other ways to invest my money. So without further ado, the third thing I really want to talk about how you can get into real estate investing is, once you have that education, choosing your path. And what I mean by that is there are so many different paths that you can go down in real estate investing. Everybody loves long-term buy and holds. You can do short-term rentals. You can flip. You can buy mortgages if you have the money to do that and just collect the money. So that's note investing. And there's many other ways. A lot of these individual ways I just listed out have different little subsets, right? So you may not just flip a single family house, maybe you flip a manufactured home. All different kinds of little subsets like that. And learning about all of them and everything that you can't get into is definitely a plus, but choosing your path, what you're most comfortable with, is the biggest thing. And if I have to kind of just throw a little guide out there on helping you out with choosing your path, I would say it comes down to two things: your risk tolerance and your the amount of money that you've got saved up. So long-term buy and holds, very low risk tolerance, low amount of money that you need relative to the other different paths, because you just need a down payment, some closing costs. You can figure out how to property manage, all that kind of stuff, all the sweat equity that goes into it. But the amount of money you need is pretty low relative to the other options. You've got short-term rentals. Here you're buying a place. Usually you can't finance it with a traditional lender. Usually you can find some kind of hard money lender or private lender. If you do go the conventional route, you're going to have to call quite a few places. I'm going to make a different video on that because I did learn everything I possibly could about Airbnbs just before this pandemic started, and that's a story in itself, and I'd love to share all that knowledge. But getting back to the point, a little bit higher of a risk tolerance because of things like a pandemic, but also because you're daily managing. It's not as passive. You're daily managing people coming in and out of your place. You're managing a cleaner. You're managing just any kind of complaints, any kind of issues that you may have. And on top of that, when you're buying the place, you're also furnishing it. So there is more money out of pocket for that. Not to mention marketing and getting on these different websites and trying to make sure you stand out from the other people. A little bit more of an involved area of investing than a long-term rental. And then of course you have flipping. Flipping, of course, taking more money because you got renovation, so you need to acquire the property, and the purchase price of the property in itself is usually a cash-only transaction. So let's say you want to buy a property for about $100,000. Usually you have to come out of pocket that $100,000, unless you find a private lender, which is what I would highly suggest doing, is you find a private lender for that purchase price. But then usually the renovations you'll have to come out of pocket. And of course, being comfortable with renovating a property and hiring different contractors and going into that whole process. So that's actually the path that I'm on. That's what I chose. A lot of it had to do with the current economy that we're in and everything that's going on with rentals and forbearance and everything that we're seeing right now. I just wanted to stay away from the rentals for the time being until I see things stabilize a little bit. So for right now, I'm just working on building that nest egg and taking advantage of the flipping market, just because with a lack of inventory, everything under $250,000 really has been flying off the shelves. And so if you can renovate a property, have your price that you're going to sell the home for, the ARV, the after repair value, come in at $250,000 or under, it won't stay on the market long, and that's what we've been seeing. So I'm also going to make a separate video on everything that's going on with my flip. I want to give everybody all the details that my partner and I are working on, and I want to share how we were able to get a really great deal in this market. With real estate prices going up, you know, some people will be scared or hesitant, but as you probably always hear in other real estate outlets of information, if you buy right, you can't go wrong, and that's the case on this one. Our ARV is about $200,000, and we got the property for $70,000. It needs about 45,000 in reno. You can do the math. It's going to be a home run deal, and we're looking to sell it, to list it on the market in about the next week. So it's about 2 weeks total of reno, and that's because my partner, he's really good at what he does, and he's great as a construction manager and handling flips, and he knows how to get everybody in and out on top of each other and get all the work done simultaneously. And so I want to go into all that kind of stuff, share all the knowledge I have, but at this juncture, I really want to make sure that you, as the person at home right now, with a family, with a job, thinking that maybe you don't have enough time to jump into something like this, I implore you, you really do. You do, everybody does, and everybody can make their situation better. If you're teetering on the fence and you're trying to figure out if it's right for you, I say at least start with really looking at your schedule, then just making sure your base knowledge of real estate is up to par and you feel comfortable, you've been reading books, you've been going through the forums, you understand the basics, then really coming to terms with what kind of path you would choose. And then lastly, once you really figure out and you've set your sights on what path it is you want to follow, I would say at that point you need to work on your networking circle. You need to find, at a minimum, a realtor that understands investments, someone who, in my case, with flipping, we have someone that we were able to negotiate their commission down because we're doing multiple deals a year. So finding someone that understands the business you're going to do, understands how to list a property the way you would want it listed, and is going to continue to work well with you, finding that realtor, finding somebody who's doing what you want to do, so a mentor. There's all kinds of ways to trade time for experience, for money, for the experience that they have and learning everything that they can. In the stage where you're trying to figure out how to even jump into this, knowledge is the most important thing. But books can only take you so far. Bigger Pockets can only take you so far. Finding somebody out there doing it in your market is going to save you years. Finding that person, going to local REI meetups, just networking with a realtor who deals with investors that may be able to connect you with another investor. And then lastly, not as important at the moment, but at some point when you do get into your first deal or your next deal, finding a lender. A lender, whether it's a hard money lender, although a little riskier, I would suggest going with a private lender. Finding a lender that has money, that understands what you're doing and wants to back you is another one. And again, I'll go into all these details in future videos on the flips that I'm working on. But for right now, I really want to make sure I just hit it home. Those are really the 4 steps that I would say you need in order to determine whether or not this is right for you, whether or not you can do it with a job and a family. And again, just to recap, it's just taking a look at your schedule, really figuring out what doesn't need to be there and replacing it with real estate. Then following that up with making sure your knowledge is on point. You've read all the books, you've got hours into the forums, you're watching the videos, you're doing everything you can to soak up as much knowledge as you can. Lastly, really figuring out how what path works for you, and then getting your network to expand and finding that realtor, that lender, and that mentor. So hopefully on the next video I'll catch you guys and I'll go a little bit deeper into the deals that I'm working on and shed some light on how I'm making all that stuff specifically work in my life.